The day my parents sold my grandmother's house. She smiled, not cried, not argued, not even surprised. She just sat quietly in her old rocking chair near the window, folded her trembling hands in her lap, and smiled like she already knew how the story would end. That smile terrified me more than anything. I still remember the sound of my mother's heels tapping across Grandma Eleanor's wooden floor that morning, sharp, fast, impatient. My father stood beside her with a stack of papers under his arm, avoiding eye contact like he always did when guilt crawled up his throat. "We found a buyer," my mother announced casually, as if she were talking about groceries instead of the home Grandma had lived in for 47 years, the same house where I spent every summer baking peach pies with her, the same porch where she held me after my first heartbreak, the same living room where Grandpa's piano still sat, untouched since the day he passed away. Grandma looked out the window calmly. "That was quick." Mom crossed her arms. "You can't live here alone anymore. It's dangerous. This is for your own good." I stood frozen near the doorway, unable to speak, because deep down, I knew this wasn't about safety. It was about money. The housing market in our town had exploded that year. Grandma's Victorian house sat on valuable land near the lake, and my parents had been obsessed with it for months. Every family dinner somehow turned into conversations about practical decisions and future investments, but Grandma never wanted to leave. That house was her entire world, at least. That's what I thought. "Mom," I whispered carefully, "did Grandma agree to this?" My father finally spoke. "Your grandmother signed the paperwork last week." I looked at Grandma in disbelief. She slowly nodded and smiled again. That smile made my stomach twist, because it wasn't sadness. It wasn't surrender either. It looked like patience, like someone watching a storm approach while already standing safely underground. But I ignored the feeling. I wanted to believe my parents weren't capable of something cruel. I wanted to believe there was still goodness somewhere inside them. Until everything changed 3 weeks later. The moving trucks came early. On a rainy Thursday morning, my mother strutted through the house directing workers, while my father carried boxes without saying much. They had already picked a retirement facility for Grandma across town. Small room, white. Walls, no garden, no piano, no memories. Helped Grandma pack her sweaters into cardboard boxes while trying not to cry. "I'm sorry," I whispered. She gently touched my hand. "Don't be," she said softly. "Sometimes people reveal themselves when they think they've won." I frowned. "What does that mean?" But she only smiled again. That same mysterious smile. And before I could ask another question, my mother burst into the room. "The buyers are arriving in an hour," she snapped. "Please hurry." That was the moment I realized something horrifying. My parents weren't grieving this loss at all. They were excited, and somehow, Grandma already knew why. The buyers arrived just before noon. A wealthy couple from the city stepped out of a black SUV, smiling as they admired the property. My mother practically glowed while shaking their hands. She acted proud, successful, victorious. Meanwhile, Grandma sat silently beside the fireplace, with her purse on her lap, watching, waiting. I stayed beside her the entire time because something in my chest felt wrong. Every laugh from my parents sounded fake. Every compliment about the house sounded poisoned. Then I overheard my mother whispering in the kitchen, "We'll finally pay off our debts," she said excitedly. My father lowered his voice. "And the condo in Florida. If there's enough left. Enough left." That's when the truth shattered me. This wasn't about Grandma's safety. They were using her, selling her life piece by piece to rescue themselves from years of reckless spending. I suddenly remembered all the vacations, The expensive cars, the designer clothes Mom loved showing off online. They were drowning financially, and Grandma's house was their lifeboat. I walked outside trying to breathe through the anger burning in my chest. Rain dripped from the porch roof, while movers loaded the final boxes into the truck. How could they do this? I whispered. But the worst part came later that evening. After the buyers signed the final documents, my parents celebrated with champagne in Grandma's own dining room. I watched my mother raise her glass to fresh starts. Inside, the house her mother was losing forever. Felt sick, but Grandma, she remained calm, almost too calm. Then suddenly she stood up, adjusted her cardigan, and asked everyone to sit down. I have something important to share, she said. The room went silent. Father looked nervous immediately. Grandma reached into her purse and pulled out a thin envelope. I visited my attorney 6 months ago, she continued. Quietly, my mother's smile disappeared, and I made a few decisions. Regarding my estate, the buyers exchanged uncomfortable glances. Dad cleared his throat. Mom, maybe this isn't the time. Oh, I think it's the perfect time. For the first time all day, her voice became sharp enough to cut glass. She handed papers across the table. My father read the first page and turned completely pale. What is this? He whispered. Grandma looked directly at him. It's proof the house was never yours to profit from. My mother snatched the papers from his hands, her face twisting with confusion. Then, panic. Because 3 months earlier, Grandma had quietly transferred ownership of the property into a preservation trust controlled by her attorney and, shockingly, me, not my parents. Me. The sale they celebrated. It legally couldn't happen without trustee approval. Approval they never had. The buyers immediately demanded explanations. My mother started shaking. You tricked us. Grandma's eyes filled with tears for the first time all day. No, she said softly. I protected myself. Silence swallowed the room. Then came the real blow. Grandma revealed she had recorded multiple conversations where my parents discussed getting the house before she dies. I felt physically sick hearing those words repeated aloud. My father buried his face in his hands. My mother started crying instantly, begging everyone to calm down. But it was too late. The buyers threatened legal action. The realtor walked out. And suddenly the perfect future my parents imagined began, collapsing right in front of them. That night, after everyone left, I sat beside Grandma in the nearly empty living room. How long did you know? I asked quietly. She stared at Grandpa's piano. The moment people start counting your belongings before you're gone, she whispered. You learn exactly where you stand in their hearts. I cried harder than I had in years. Because she wasn't angry, she was heartbroken, and somehow, that hurt even more. The weeks after the failed sale were chaos. The buyers sued my parents for fraud. The realtor publicly dropped them as clients. Word spread quickly through our small town, and suddenly, the people my mother once impressed with fancy clothes and stage smiles stopped answering her calls. But the real punishment wasn't financial. It was loneliness. Because once the truth surfaced, everyone saw what they had tried to do to Grandma. Even relatives who barely spoke to us began calling in disgust. My father became quieter every day. The confident man who once controlled every conversation now sat silently at family gatherings, staring into his coffee. But my mother, she blamed everyone except herself. She manipulated us. She screamed one afternoon after arriving at Grandma's house. Unexpectedly. Yes, Grandma's house. Because she never lost it. The Preservation Trust protected everything exactly as she planned. I stepped between them before Grandma could respond. "No," I said firmly. "You manipulated yourselves." Mom stared at me like I'd betrayed her. Maybe I had, but for the first time in my life, I realized protecting family doesn't mean defending their cruelty. Sometimes love means refusing to stay silent. A month later, Grandma invited me to the porch one evening as the sun melted across the lake behind her house. "I need to tell you something," she said. She handed me another envelope. Inside were updated trust documents naming me as future caretaker of the home. My eyes widened. Instantly, "Grandma, I can't." "Yes, you can." Her voice was gentle but certain. This house was never about money. It was about memory, about love, about protecting the people who truly value it. Tears burned my eyes. "I don't care about the house," I whispered. "I know," she smiled. "That's exactly why you deserve it." A few months later, my parents filed for bankruptcy. Their Florida condo dream disappeared. Their expensive lifestyle collapsed. And eventually, they separated under the weight of resentment and blame. But Grandma, she stayed exactly where she belonged, in her home. Her garden bloomed again that spring. The piano played again. The porch filled with laughter again. And slowly, so did her heart. One night while helping her bake peach pies, I finally asked the question that haunted me since the beginning. Why did you let them think they won? Grandma placed the pie carefully into the oven before answering. Because greed reveals itself best when nobody stops it. I never forgot those words. People think revenge is loud, explosive, cruel. But sometimes the smartest revenge is simply letting people expose themselves. What they didn't understand was this. Grandma wasn't weak. She was patient. And in the end, patience destroyed their lies far more completely than anger ever could. Now every time I sit on that old porch, watching the sunset over the lake, I think about her smile that morning, the smile that terrified me. Because she already knew something I didn't. The truth always arrives eventually, and when it does, Gree!